Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Before I get started tonight, last week apparently I called the man Tony Savalas instead of Telly Savalas. I don't know why. It's just one of them things. You know, sometimes you mess up. It's the kind of thing that can happen to anybody, but apparently a few people out there took exception to the fact that I was using the wrong name. What can I say? Mistakes happen, and apparently I pushed the wrong button and started World War III or something. Anyway, yeah, it's Telly Savalas, not Tony, but oh well, what can I do? Don't forget, the Out of This World UFO Conference is coming up fast. April 4th, there will be a special appearance by Ben Moss and Tony Angiola from the TV series Hangar 1. They'll be at the Edinburgh Auditorium, which is right behind Edinburgh City Hall, from 6 p.m. until 9 p.m. April 5th is the UFO Festival, which is held at the Edinburgh City Hall. Come and enjoy the lighter side of UFOs and meet some of the guest speakers who will also be there. Fun, food, and a little bit of exercise as you walk about seeing all the displays. April 6th, at the Edinburgh Conference Center at Renaissance, the speaker lineup is not to be missed. For more information, go to roswellbooks.com. You'll be glad you went, and don't be sad you didn't. The Edinburgh UFO Conference is listed as being a number 3 UFO conference in the entire world. And it's just down the road from Laredo, just 150 miles or so. To begin with, I am not a Luddite. A Luddite is a person who is opposed to new technology and ways of working. The name is derived from Ned Ludd, who worked in a factory as a stocker in the 1800s. He became enraged and smashed the machines he was supposed to be working on. There are some who claim Ned Ludd never actually existed, but then, if he didn't, where did the name come from? It really just depends on which articles you read. The Luddites were 19th century English textile workers who were protesting against newly developed labor-saving technologies, primarily between 1811 and 1816. The stocking frames, and what in the world is that? Okay, now I've got some kind of a weird alarm going off. How bizarre. Anyway, the Luddites would gather together at night and plan, as well as practice, their maneuvers. Then they would slip into town and break up any machinery that was used in the textile industry. The British Army had to be sent in to try to stop the Luddites from taking down the entire textile industry in England. At one time, there were more soldiers fighting Luddites than British soldiers fighting Napoleon. Technology advanced and the Luddite movement wound up falling apart. There are still folks out there today who fear or just hate new improved technology. Theodore John Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, is an American domestic terrorist, a former mathematics professor, and anarchist author. The name Unabomber came from his targeting universities and airlines. He had been a mathematics prodigy who abandoned an academic career in 1969 to pursue a more primitive lifestyle. Between 1978 and 1995, he killed 3 people and injured 23 others in an attempt to start a revolution by conducting a nationwide bombing campaign targeting people involved with modern technology. In conjunction, he issued a social critique opposing industrialization and advancing a nature-centered form of anarchism. Yes, there's one of those words I'll not be using in conversation very often. Anarchism. I don't even know if that's the correct spelling or pronunciation. Kaczynski says, I'm having brain problems. Kaczynski hated technology and tried to stop it by killing people he thought were responsible for creating it. You could say that Ted was a Luddite. I like my computer most of the time, except when it stops working or acts up and needs to go see a geek. I like my cell phone. I can find just about anything I need without having to go to the library or stop and ask somebody. I use both all the time. I do not want my computer to turn the TV on or contact the grocery store to tell them I'm out of coffee. I don't want my coffee maker talking to the refrigerator either. There's really no such thing as being too smart, but that only applies to people. And there are some folks who need to get started on becoming just a little smart. Machines don't need to be smart. A simple fact they can do a better job than we can doesn't make any difference. I don't want smart machines. Way back when I was a youngin', there was a movie about a super smart computer that was given control of all the United States nuclear weapons. The movie was called Colossus, the Forbin Project. It came out in 1970 and was a shocker. It was based on a 1966 book called Colossus. The movie went like this. The United States creates a supercomputer to run all of our nuclear weapons, so if those sneaky Russians launched an attack on us, the computer would do the right thing and retaliate by blowing up the planet. Dr. Forbin is responsible for coming up with this super smart computer, and it becomes sentient. The computer named Colossus discovers there's a second computer hidden deep under the USSR, and Colossus wants to talk to it. What could possibly go wrong? So the President of the United States allows contact between these two super powerful computers that now control every nuclear weapon on the planet. Like I said, what could possibly go wrong? All just science fiction. Nothing like this could ever happen. The book, From the Earth to the Moon, was just science fiction. Submarines were science fiction when Jules Verne first came up with that idea, too. He also wrote the book From the Earth to the Moon. It almost looks as if anything thought up by science fiction writers becomes a reality once the kids reading it grow up. The flip phone was designed by Martin Cooper, who oversaw the invention of the first mobile phone in the 70s. He directly credited Star Trek for inspiring his vision. He'd watched Star Trek and was fascinated by their communicators. When he grew up, he got busy trying to create what he had seen on TV. Concepts of artificial servants and companions date at least as far back as ancient legends of Cadmus, who was supposed to have sewn dragon teeth that turned into soldiers to fight as his army. Then there was Pygmalion, whose statue of Galatea came to life. Many ancient mythologies include artificial people, such as the talking mechanical handmaidens built by the Greek god Hephaestus, who made it out of gold, and the clay golems of Jewish legend, as well as the clay giants of Norse legend. People read these stories, then set about trying to bring them to reality. Samsung smart TVs have microphones, so viewers can make voice commands, such as request for movie recommendations. The commands typically aren't transmitted outside the home unless users activate the feature. If the TV is off, there's no listening being done. Hopefully. According to some, the CIA is listening in over these microphones. The manufacturers say this can't be done, but it can. You have a smartphone. You take the precaution of turning it off. Well, the CIA or the NSA can send a signal to your phone and turn it back on. Then, not only can they listen in on what you say, they also know exactly where you are using the GPS app. Whenever groups like the Bilderbergers or the Bohemian Grove or any of these top secret groups get together, they don't allow cell phones or tablets or any kind of device that can be used to listen in. All electronics are to be left outside the building. Gee, I wonder why they do that. It probably has something to do with the fact that these people know what the government can do because they kind of own the government. On many occasions, I've been sitting at my desk working on my computer when a little icon pops up that says the computer camera is being used. When I first got the computer, I turned the camera off, and then I put a piece of tape over the lens. Someone is trying to watch me as I work. I wonder who and why. No, I'm not paranoid, I'm just cautious. And a little paranoid. As Winston Churchill said, you have enemies. Good. It means you've stood up for something sometime in your life. I just hope I stood up for the right thing. Back when DNA testing was first thought of, no one was willing to submit their precious bodily fluids to be recorded by some unknown company that might be working for the government. So along comes a company that says, send us your DNA and $100 and we'll tell you where you're from. Suddenly everybody is sending in samples to find out where their great-great-great-great-grandfather is from, and the government has a record of your DNA. Is this a bad thing? Maybe, maybe not. The scary part is, let's say there's a crime committed, and some lab technician screws up somehow and accidentally submits your DNA as being involved in the crime. Well, how are you going to fight that in court? Just something to keep in mind. So folks got all up in arms about the CIA and the NSA using their smart TVs to listen in around home. Then companies came up with the voice-activated smart home technology. You have a microphone in the middle of your home that is on 24/7, and somebody just might be listening in. The CIA or NSA doesn't need to bug our homes anymore. They just sell people a microphone or a smart TV, and we pay for it. save the government some money so they can use it for other things like vacations and robot armies. The humanoid bear. It's a battlefield extrication assist robot. Can locate victims in a mine shaft, a battlefield or a toxic spill, earthquake damaged structure, and then it can lift them up and carry them over long distances to safety, according to the manufacturer Vecna Robotics. And it does this without risking any more lives. Of all the groups of military who have earned the Medal of Honor, a single group were awarded this honor the most. These are the medics. More medics have received the Medal of Honor, mostly posthumously. That means they died doing their duty. So now there's a rescue robot that can run across the battlefield, lift a wounded soldier, and spirit him or her away to safety. The really weird thing about this robot is it has a bear mounted on its frame. Not a real bear-looking thing that has come to see if you're edible or not, but it looks like a giant teddy bear. A giant camouflaged teddy bear. Why not use a Valkyrie? Well, I know why. Valkyries only showed up to grab the dead after a battle to whisk them away to Valhalla, if they fought bravely enough. If you're a wounded soldier laying on the battlefield and a woman wearing armor riding a horse shows up, it would mean you're beyond the reaches of the medics. Still, it would look kind of cool. Nope, the rescue robot looks like a teddy bear, and it plows along on tracks instead of feet. These robots can also work in buildings that have collapsed and in hazardous conditions of any kind. The same company is also trying to develop a home version that can help lift and move those with mobility trouble. Now, what could possibly be wrong with this? These robots are kind of self-controlled. Nobody's sitting there with a joystick telling them, go left, go right, lift that object. The robot just kind of makes its own mind up as what it needs to do. Say you're sitting in a chair at home watching TV and the robot, for whatever reason, decides it's bath time. Well, guess what? You're getting a bath whether you want one or not. After all, the robot knows what's best. In 1941 to 42, Isaac Asimov formulated the 3 laws of robotics, and in the process coined the word robotics. The 3 laws of robotics are a set of rules devised by the science fiction author Isaac Asimov. The rules were introduced in 1942 short story Runaround. In the stories, the 3 laws are supposed to be from the Handbook of Robotics, 56th edition, 2058 AD, and are as follows. The first law: a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. The second law is a robot must obey the orders given it by a human being except where such orders would conflict with the first law. The third law: a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. I hear these laws being quoted by a lot of people who use them to justify the creation of robots. They say there's nothing to worry about because of these 3 laws. You know, murder is also against the law, but that doesn't seem to stop a lot of killings each year. And the laws of robotics were the creation of one man who wanted to sell books. They don't actually exist. Kind of like the Prime Directive from Star Trek. I actually hear people refer to the Prime Directive as keeping aliens from contacting us here on Earth, as if the aliens watched Star Trek. And keep in mind, this was just a story. It's one thing to create a machine that makes life better for someone. Let's say a wheelchair that can be controlled by a person's mind. Now that would be cool. The person in it could just think, I want to be over there, and the chair would move in that direction. But the person in the chair is still in charge. It's not like the chair is saying, you need to be over there, so I'm taking you. The chair is under control of a person. But folks are trying to invent robots that can think for themselves, and let's make it just a little more creepy. Add some emotions to make things really weird, and then let's make the robot look like a human. Go back and read or watch The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Marvin, the depressed robot with a brain the size of the universe. And there was the happy automatic doors. Duvall sold the first Unimate to General Motors in 1960, and it was installed in 61 in a plant in Ewing Township, New Jersey, to lift hot pieces of metal from a die casting machine and place them in cooling liquid. June 21st, 1984, a 34-year-old die-cast operator who had 15 years' experience went into cardiopulmonary arrest after being pinned between the right rear end of the hydraulic robot and a safety pole. The investigation tried to lay the blame on the worker. They said he stepped over a barrier and he was working in a location where he shouldn't have been. After all, it was his job to be there. In Houston, there's a company that makes self-controlled robot security guards. They look suspiciously like Daleks, only without the gun barrel sticking out the front. These security guards motor about buildings and parking lots, and mostly they just film what's going on. They don't interdict in stopping a crime. Should someone try to rob a bank, one of these security guard robots would film them as they steal the money and make their getaway. Oh yeah, and it would also call the police. It's kind of like just a fancy camera that can drive itself around. The autonomous robots are being used at banks and hospitals right now. They don't have any self-defense or offensive equipment yet. Why stop at banks and hospitals? How about putting them to use in nuclear weapons facilities, or how about prisons? In a place like that, it would probably be a good idea to make some kind of defensive capability, so the convicts can't simply break the robot and escape. Then the idea will come out, let's put some kind of a weapon on the robot, but it'll be controlled by a remote supervisor. If a shot is needed, the robot has to wait for a human to assess the situation and then pull the trigger. That won't work because the decision to shoot or not shoot takes seconds, not minutes. And any machine being used to guard someplace will be looked at for military use. How about putting some rifles on these robots and sending them into battle? Autonomous robots that have the ability to decide whether to kill or not. Oh, but that'll never happen, right? The SGR-A1 is a type of sentry gun that was jointly developed by Samsung, Techwin, and Korean University to assist South Korean troops in the Korean Demilitarized Zone. Great. The folks who made my cell phone also make autonomous robots with guns. It is widely considered as the first unit of its kind to have an integrated system that includes surveillance, tracking, firing, and voice recognition. While units of the SGR-A1 have been reportedly deployed, their number is unknown due to the project being highly classified. These robots sit in one place guarding the border between North and South Korea. It will only be a short time before these robots are allowed to move about, probably on a rail system. Until the company building them can create a walking robot, and then the robot will be able to move about on its own, looking for somebody to kill. Now, my definition of gun control is sight alignment and trigger control. In fact, I was just at the range the other day. I'm glad to see I can still put rounds downrange and hit what I'm aiming at. There's always the human factor. You never point a weapon at anything you don't want to destroy. Ever. A robot won't have that human problem. It will be target acquired and bam. You can program a machine to think, but you can't program them to reason. Oh, darn, that was just some kid with a BB gun. Oh, he doesn't have to worry about shooting his eye out. I've been in situations where a guy with a gun was acting hostile. We'd been called to back up a group of sheriff's deputies searching for an escaped prisoner. We tracked him down to a house in Webb County. We surrounded the house, and the sergeant in charge called for the man to come out and give up. He waved his arms around and yelled and screamed. He was holding a shotgun, but he never raised it or pointed it at anyone. The deputies managed to talk him into dropping the gun and surrendering. A robot would probably have just capped around and the situation would have been over. Well, the guy was an escapee, but he hadn't done anything that called for the death penalty. Would a robot have been able to consider this? When I was at Fort Knox learning to operate the M60 tank, and we were learning how to load the main gun. Sergeant Cobb told us about the Russian T-64 tank with an auto-loader. Of course, we wanted to know why the U.S. didn't use the same system. Well, it seems as if the Russians were having a bit of a problem with their autoloader. The ammo select mechanism would, on occasion, grab the gunner and try to stuff him into the breech. Geez, that would hurt. It's not like the gunner was in a place he shouldn't be. The inside of a tank is very small, and any moving equipment can be a hazard. When you'd fire the main gun, the breech would come back into the turret about 4 feet. If you were standing between it and the back of the turret, well, bad things would happen. Then the back of the breech would pop open and an empty shell would pop out and it would bounce around the inside of the turret. You had to just kind of take your life into your own hands being a tanker, I think. So someone wants to come up with a tank that doesn't have a crew. What could possibly go wrong? The PL-01 is a tank being designed without a crew. Instead, it's supposed to work like a drone. The tank commander, driver, and gunner are all sitting in the rear with the gear as the tank goes rumbling into battle. If the tank gets hit, it's going to survive because it has all the latest armor and it is near invincible. And it's remote controlled. Now there's a little something called signal lag. The soldier in the rear sees a hostile tank through his monitor. He pushes the fire button. There is sometimes a minuscule lag of time as the signal passes through the air. When you can see the enemy can see you. It's not like a sniper where you're hiding in the bushes. Instead, you're sitting in this giant chunk of metal that moves through the terrain and just about anybody can spot it when it's moving. and it's giving off a ton of heat, so anyone with a thermal camera would be able to spot it as well. On a battlefield, you win in seconds and not minutes. The further away from the battle you are, the longer the lag time. And then you've got a little something like electronics interference and things like that, so things can happen. Say you send the signal to the tank to fire, and the signal winds up going to the wrong tank, and a tank sitting in the rear starts unloading its rounds. Well, that would just be bad. And don't you know there's already somebody out there working on a way to hack the signal to control the tank so the enemy can seize control and turn the tank back on its controllers? Great. Then you'll have a nearly invincible tank running around in your own lines, which is being controlled by the enemy. Let's face it, it's a lot cheaper to invent an override system than to actually build the tank. So then there will be the guy who says, let's eliminate the crew altogether. We'll make self-controlled tanks, just so long as the tank doesn't have a computer glitch. How many times have you discovered your computer was screwed up? Just a few times. Just enough to really make life interesting. People make mistakes, but computers have problems too. And at that charming moment, I'm going to take a brief pause and play a couple of commercials and drink some coffee. So don't go away. I'll be right back after this. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Do you have skin? Would you like to take better care of it? Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and set up an appointment. Call 723-3019. Did you hear a bump in the night and you think it just might be a ghost? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. That's the LPRS for all your otherworldly needs. Coffee, nectar of the gods. And at the Organic Man Coffee Trike, you'll find coffee made the right way, one delicious cup at a time. Stop on by 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. And remember, life is too short to drink bad coffee. Did you go out UFO hunting and couldn't focus on the sky? Swing on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle Del Norte, right across from the Embassy Suites. That's not a weather balloon, that's a flying saucer. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. And welcome back to the show. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but I'm trying to run the commercials in a different order because, well, I get bored of listening to the same things over and over too. I'm actually planning on re-recording all the commercials at some time whenever I have a few hours where I'm not busy. The book I'm working on, however, the Fort McIntosh and the Paranormal, is taking a lot of time. The hours I don't spend at the library reading old newspaper articles or digging through books, I spend sitting at my computer going through all the possible historical sites and trying to locate any information dealing with Fort McIntosh also known as Laredo Junior College, Laredo Community College, and simply Laredo College today. If by chance you attended any classes or had anything to do out at the fort any time in the past, or someone told you an interesting story about something they saw while out at the fort, send me a note. I'd be interested in hearing about it, and if I can get enough information, I'll put it in the book. You can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com, but please only send me stories that have something to do with the fort at this time. I hear lots of really, really good stories from people about ghosts and things, but unfortunately quite a few of them aren't connected to the fort. Right now I'm just working on the one book, so send me a note if you've got a good story from Fort McIntosh. Robots won't need guns to take over. Let's say they don't have any weapons. Somebody passes a law and says it's against the law to arm robots, like it's against the law to kill people, and it's against the law to rob banks. They just allowed to, say, drive cars, fly airplanes, and stock shelves at the grocery store, things like that. Well, a robot shutdown would bring most cities to a standstill, and with no food on the shelves, a lot of people would starve to death in a month or two. We keep food in our pantry. We also have a lot of water on hand for emergencies. There's a lot of people out there that don't. How long would it take for people to forget how to handle a car if they didn't drive every day? Any skill that has to be learned can also be forgotten. And then don't forget about that Uber car that ran over somebody on a bicycle. Let's face it, smart robots sometimes aren't all that smart. They're only as smart as the person that programs them, and the person that programs them has to think of every single possible contingency and then do something about it. Over 37,000 people die in traffic accidents in 2016. That's just the United States. That's 102 people a day, and this was just by accident. What would happen if cars being driven by robots suddenly were being controlled by a bunch of teenagers who somehow managed to hack into the system? You've seen that video game Grand Theft Auto? Well, this could be a whole new version of that. And yes, people hack into computers all the time. What if it's an airplane being piloted by a robot that suddenly is being controlled by some kid who wants to see what it's like to control an airplane? How about the autonomous robot decides the folks in the plane need to meet the folks in that building down there? Could a teen hack into the controls of an airplane or a car? Well, back in 2001, Gary McKinnon hacked into not only NASA, but the Pentagon as well. These are both super secure computer systems. A car or an airplane wouldn't be nearly as difficult to get into. And then there are those people who actually want to kill. Say some group of religious fanatics who think anyone who believes anything different from them should die. If I can think it up, I'm sure the crazy folks can, and there are a few out there. Our colleges and universities invite a lot of these folks into our country and teach them how to do these things. Just look at any of the major universities. They have hundreds of foreign students from countries that don't exactly like us, and they're teaching them everything there is to know about robotics and computers. It's almost as if we're designing our own destruction. I'm not saying these people are all bad, but there's going to be one or two in the group, some Ted Kaczynski kind of character who goes home and says, hey, let's build a computer system that can hack into all of these self-driven cars and turn them into weapons. Then the idea of having emotional robots, that just sounds plain bad. NAO, which is pronounced now, is an autonomous, programmable humanoid robot developed by Aldebaran Robotics in France, which is headquartered in Paris. The robot's development began with the launch of Project Now in 2004. Now has been programmed to mimic the emotional skills of a 1-year-old child, learning and interpreting specific cues from humans and responding accordingly. It can also use video cameras to work out how close a person comes and sensors to detect how tactile they are. As if you want the robot to hug you, it will. If you want to tell the robot it's doing a good job, all you have to do is smile or pat it on the head. This according to the manufacturers. A 1-year-old. Would it be a good idea to have a robot that can work forever, is stronger than a man, and has the emotions of a 1-year-old child? This would be just short of dealing with a chimpanzee with an M16. A Pepper is a robot designed to read and, more importantly, respond to users' moods. It was created by SoftBank, a Japanese internet company. A Pepper stands 4 feet tall, weighs 62 pounds, and is equipped with facial recognition technology and a number of cameras, audio recorders, and sensors. The technology allows the robot to learn how to behave over time, instead of having to be programmed for specific tasks. Their aim is to develop affectionate robots that can make people smile, said Masayoshi Son, the billionaire behind SoftBank. The humanoid can be bought from Japan. Just go online and look. It will cost you about $2,000, and I don't think that includes shipping. You're going to have to ship a package that weighs about 62 pounds from halfway around the world. If you can get a puppy, it will do the same thing for a lot less money. What happens if Pepper is bought by somebody with anger issues? Will Pepper become angry as well? Do we need an angry robot running around? What about this? Say some serial killer decides he wants a robot. You know, that would make a really good book now that I think about it. A serial killer buys 10 robots and trains them to go on killing spree. If somebody doesn't write this in a book, I just might. Once more, if I can think of it, so can others. Other less stable people. Not that I'm all that stable, but I know there are people out there that are far worse than I am. The government will look at any machine and quickly ask, can it be used as a weapon? This is their job. The government's first job is to protect the citizens. Si vis pacem para bellum. Let me try that again. I don't speak Latin. Si vis pacem para bellum. This is Latin for, to live in peace, you must prepare for war. Someone in Washington has to look at a robot and ask, can the folks on the other side of the planet use this to attack us? If so, what do we do about it? In order to study a robot army and how it will fight, we need robot soldiers so we can watch them and learn how they work. Then there's the idea that to fight a robot military, you need a robot military. This is kind of how people think. So the military puts together a few hundred robot soldiers to protect our country. Let's make that a few thousand because the world is a big place. Then, some far-right or far-left politician says, Let's use these robot soldiers to enforce the law. Just look at the situation in Chicago. 589 people were killed in 2018. That does not take into consideration how many people were injured in an attempt to kill them. How hard is it to think, just maybe the government in Washington should do something about this? The Posse Comitatus Act says the soldiers cannot be used to enforce civil law without whose authority? Congress. A Posse Comitatus is a legal act that allows the local authority to deputize citizens to act as law enforcement personnel. You ever heard of a posse? That is when the sheriff deputizes a group to hunt down some criminal. The Posse Comitatus Act kept active duty soldiers from being used for a posse. So some congressman decides that the situation in some part of the country needs immediate action, and they're going to send in the robot soldiers to take care of things. After all, who can override the Posse Comitatus Act? Congress. Once the government has discovered a means of controlling the country's population, they will never give it up. Power leads to wanting more power, and they will always justify it by saying, "This is for your own good." The Second Amendment was designed to protect citizens from the government. But at the time, the citizens had the exact same weapons as the government: rifles and cannon. Did you know it's not against the law to own a cannon? You just can't fire the thing off. Now, the government has passed a law saying citizens can't own machine guns or tanks or jets or things like that. Well, you can own a jet, you just can't have a combat jet. Once again, this is for your own good. So we sure won't be legally allowed to own robot soldiers. This doesn't mean some folks won't figure out how to get them. They just won't worry about something like a law. I can see it now, black market robot soldiers, probably coming out of China. Some assembly required. A lot of folks will say this can't happen because the government won't allow them to be shipped into the country, like drugs and illegal aliens can't get into our country. And there are people out there who would be willing to spend a few $1,000s to have their own robot soldiers to protect them, either from their neighbors or from the government. I just hope they paint them in such a way we can tell whose robots are whose. How about some super rich folks who want security but don't want Wackenhut standing around their property? I'm sure someone is already marketing home security robots. Oh, in case you didn't know it, the camo dudes, those guys that guard Area 51, they all work for Wackenhut. They're not military. They're a private security company. Then there are the robots that look more and more like people, like the movie Terminator. The world's most human-like robot has been working at a university receptionist since 2015. The scientists predict this new form of technology will eventually be providing child care and offer friendship to lonely elderly people. Nadine has soft skin and brunette hair. She not only meets and greets visitors, I've already accepted the robot as being kind of human. She smiles, makes eye contact, and shakes hands. Nadine can even recognize guests and spark up a conversation based on previous chats. I talk to my cats and dog all the time, and they look at me like they understand. Excuse me. I tell Sam to get off the counter, and she looks at me as if to say, "You're not my boss." If Just if you're visiting the university and you encounter Nadine and she holds out her hand, do you shake hands with a robot or not? If you say to yourself, this is just a machine, heck with it, and you refuse to shake hands, will the robot feel incensed? After all, some robots are advanced enough they are showing emotions. These advanced creations are beginning to learn from their past. If enough folks refuse to greet the robot, will it begin to harbor anger towards people? How long before some emotional outbreak happens? Next, you have the problem of robots becoming so human-like, we have difficulty recognizing who's who. That movie Blade Runner comes to mind, the original with Harrison Ford. I haven't seen the remake. Robot guides at a Tokyo museum look so human and speak so smoothly they almost outdo people. A Japanese robotics expert, Hiroshi Ishiguro, an Osaka University professor, says they will be useful for research on how people interact with robots and on what difficulties the person has from the machine. So they want to know how people interact with robots. Knowing how people respond to death can help us get over death. Knowing how people respond to war helps soldiers get over combat-related issues. Knowing why serial killers have no regard for others just might help do away with them, but I very seriously doubt that. Understanding how people interact when dealing with robots will only lead to making more lifelike robots. Lifelike up to the point we can't tell who is real and who is a machine. But I'll bet the robots will know. The big claim is by studying robots we can learn more about humans. That's kind of like studying cars to learn how airplanes work. If you look at how the new robots act and look, you might say there's no way they'll ever look human enough to be confusing. And just look back at what robots looked like a few dozen years ago. The changes are drastic. Seeing as computers double in speed and usability every 18 months, how long will it take before robots look just like us? How long before they begin to think they're better than us? It won't be every robot on Earth deciding to do away with humans. It will be like maybe just one really smart robot that stands up and declares war on the humans. The others will fall in, either just because or because of computer programming. And maybe I watch too many sci-fi movies. The energetically autonomous tactical robot, called an Eater, was created by Cyclone Power Technologies and Robotic Technologies Incorporated for the United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA. Government agencies should know you should only have 2 or 3 words in your name, not 6 or 7, because like CIA, FBI, you start getting names like DARPA, it's just too hard to say. United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. How in the heck do you put that on a sign? Well, I don't think they have a sign. The idea was to create a robot that could go on long-term missions without requiring fueling or recharging. They came up with a robot that feeds on vegetation to create its own fuel. It also has a built-in chainsaw in case it needs to cut trees down to gain access to an area. Well, people saw this robot with a chainsaw, and they started asking questions about what exactly is it supposed to do with that saw. They wanted to know whether or not it used the saw to chop up dead enemy soldiers and use them for fuel. Another question concerning what the robot would do if there were no dead humans around. Would it decide to create its own? That obviously wouldn't be difficult since it already has a chainsaw. Well, Cyclone Power Technologies and Robotic Technologies together and DARPA responded to these allegations and clarified that the robot was strictly a vegetarian. It didn't eat humans, living or dead, and there was no plan to make it do so. Notice they never said it wouldn't kill anyone using the chainsaw. They only said that it won't eat them. Kind of like that chuckle saying we used to have in the Army, they can kill you, but they can't eat you. You've got a robot with a chainsaw running around. I'm sure it can kill people. Doggo is the name of a small tracked robot built by General Robotics of Israel. The robot is nimble and lightweight. It can go under cars, maneuver around small corners, and even climb stairs. And it's fitted with 8 cameras, which make it suitable for reconnaissance and rescue operations. It is also armed with a Glock 26 pistol, which makes it suitable for other duties. The pistol is inserted sideways into the robot and is controlled by an operator. It can fire 5 rounds in 2 seconds, and it has a magazine, it has a magazine that holds 14 rounds. The weapon is stable and extremely accurate. If I built a robot armed with a pistol, it would be used to shoot people I didn't like. A robot with a handgun isn't for home defense. This robot is very quiet. It could drive right up behind somebody, as long as it doesn't knock something over. The Glock 26 is a 9mm, which can do some damage, as in kill someone. Can we say assassin robot, maybe? Well, in a hostage situation, I can see a real use for this robot. The bad guy wouldn't know what hit him. On the other hand, it could also be used to take out someone you didn't much like. Well, how about a totally bizarre robot with no known use other than to do one odd thing? The Hitchbot. It hitchhikes through cities and across states all by itself. Somebody created 2 of these creatures. In 2014, the first robot hitchhiker went over 6,200 miles from Halifax to Victoria in Canada. The journey took 26 days, during which the robot hitched 19 rides. Who in the heck stopped and picked up a robot hitchhiker? I don't know. The following year, it hitchhiked across several cities in Germany and the Netherlands. That same year, they built a second robot and launched it to hitchhike across the U.S. The robot started its journey in Salem, Massachusetts, and was supposed to end up in San Francisco. It never got to its destination as it was murdered in Philadelphia. Its head was stolen and the rest of the body was completely destroyed. It was written off as being irreparable. It had become evident that something had happened to the robot when it suddenly disappeared from an online map that allowed people to monitor its location. The robot took pictures at a 20-minute interval and could have taken pictures of its assailant, but it seems that whoever destroyed it did so within the 20-minute delay. Just another unsolved murder here. Okay, why such a delay in photography? No one thought, let's put a video camera on this thing? And who was it that gave the other robots all those rides? If I'm driving down the road and I see a robot hitchhiking on the side of the road, I might stop and take pictures, but I'm not letting it into my truck. Who knows what it might do? There's nothing like being comforted in your last moments on Earth, like holding hands with a robot. There is a robot called the Last Moments Robot. It comes into the room and it says, "Hello," and then it states the person's name. "I am the Last Moment Robot. I am here to help you and guide you through your last moments on Earth. I am sorry that your family and friends couldn't be with you right now, but don't be afraid. I'm here to comfort you. Maybe you should have made some better friends. Let's face it, a lot of folks have thousands of friends on Facebook, but not many real-life friends." The robot sits by the side of the bed, places a pillow over the person's head, and pushes down until... No, wait a minute. That's not it. The robot extends a robot arm and places a cold plastic hand on the person's hand, and it sits there, waiting for the person to die. I wonder if they stamp a little skull and crossbones on the robot for each of its missions. The robot is connected to the front desk by telemetry, so the nurses know when to come and collect the body. Who dreamt this thing up, I don't know. I'm willing to bet it's out of Japan. But why on earth a robot sitting next to you when you die? I don't see that as being comforting at all. Me, I would much rather have Oscar the death cat hanging around at the end. Oscar is a therapy cat that it was one of 6 cats that were adopted in 2005 by the Sterry House Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Providence, Rhode Island. The Sterry House bills itself as a pet-friendly facility that allows a variety of pets to visit and reside there. It's a 41-bed unit that treats people with end-stage Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and other illnesses, most of whom are generally unaware of their surroundings. Wonder how they can say rehabilitation if it's an end-stage facility. Oscar has been described as a generally aloof, typical cat, and that it is not friendly towards people whatsoever. Usually will hiss at people and then sneak away and hide somewhere. The staff began noticing that Oscar would sit on the bed next to a dying patient. When Oscar would crawl up onto the mattress, the end was near. Well, the doctor began keeping track of Oscar's score, and so far he's batting 100. I can't get the impression out of my head of Oscar holding his paws over somebody's face so they'll stop breathing. I used to have a cat that would lay on my face one time, and it's hard to breathe through all that fur. So, would you want a death robot or a death cat visiting you during the last few minutes? At least the cat you can pet. Artificial intelligence sounds too much like replacing us humans. Dr. Michio Kaku had this to say about artificial intelligence. The potential of AI is real in the sense that if artificial intelligent robots leave the laboratory, it could signal the end of the human race. However, let's be practical. Our most advanced robots have the intelligence of a cockroach, a retarded, lobotomized cockroach. You put one of our robots in Fukushima, for instance, instead of cleaning up the mess, they just fall over. They can barely walk correctly. The Pentagon even sponsored a challenge, the DARPA challenge, to create a robot that could clean up the Fukushima nuclear disaster. All the robots failed except one. They failed to do simple things like using a broom or turning a valve. That's how primitive they are. However, in the coming decades, I expect robots to become as smart as a mouse, and then a rabbit, then a dog, finally a monkey. At that point, who knows? Perhaps by the end of the century it could be dangerous. but not now. In which case, I think we should put a chip in their brain that will shut them off. The conclusion is we have time. We have time in which to deal with robots as they gradually, slowly become more intelligent. I think it's good to alert people that this is happening, but the time frame is not years, the time frame is decades, or as one scientist said, the probability that a sentient robot will be built soon is similar to the probability a 747 jetliner is assembled spontaneously by a hurricane. So we're still children when it comes to harnessing artificial intelligence. Not that it can't happen. That was a quote from Dr. Michio Kaku about artificial intelligence. So we have a few decades until it's time to worry. I remember when I joined the Border Patrol, it seemed like it was just yesterday. Well, that was a few decades ago. Maybe we shouldn't wait until 2040 to stop the artificial intelligence takeover. The robot holocaust would be better addressed right now. I'd say pass laws against making machines smart, but this would never work, and it would only affect law-abiding citizens. Those rogue states are going to build anything they deem fit to win the war on anyone who disagrees with them. Somebody needs to hurry up and invent the Voight-Kampff test. That's the thing Harrison Ford used to figure out who the replicants were. October 26th, 2017. Sophia the robot was granted citizenship in Saudi Arabia. This is the country where women can't even drive. Of course, Sophia isn't really a woman. It just looks an awful lot like one. Women in Saudi Arabia are second-class citizens, but Sophia is a full citizen. This should make those women's rights marchers do something, but they don't seem interested. In March of 2016, Sophia's creator, David Hanson of Hanson Robotics, asked Sophia during a live demonstration at the SXSW festival, "Do you want to destroy humans?" With a blank expression, Sophia responded, "Okay, I will destroy humans." This sounds more like a prediction of things to come. Like the movie Westworld, the original. I saw it when it first came out back in 1973. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. It was fun and scary to work on. You can find the last 130 shows at strangethings.podomatic.com. The rest you can find on YouTube. Send me any suggestions you have for future shows, and be sure and send me your scary stories from Fort McIntosh if you have any. You can contact me at strangethings@arkanasa.com. Until next week, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.